Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Press podcast, where we as leaders, we press in. We see pressure as a privilege because it's in the pressing that the oil is produced, that purpose is revealed. And today, I've got a really special episode for you because we have our first official guest on the show. It's a good friend of mine. I'm excited about the conversation that we had around AI and leadership. I think it's going to benefit you. I think it's going to challenge you. And so without further ado, let's press in together. Well, hey, I am so excited for today to have our first official guest on the podcast, a good friend of mine, and excited for our conversation today. It's so funny in introducing you. I don't know that I know how to pronounce your last name. So give me some.
I want you to give it a shot.
Right. This is my friend Daniel, and I would say, is it like Huynh? Is there an additional H? Huynh?
Huynh. You got it.
Huynh. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right. Awesome. Well, Daniel, man, so honored to have this conversation, to be connecting with you. It's been, at least a few years now, I think, that we have known each other, have gotten connected, originally connected through a small group within our church community. And Daniel, his wife, great friends of my wife and I, and we just kind of hit it off and have always had really great discussions. I always appreciate Daniel's thought leadership, his insight. I always feel like you're so articulate, able to explain things so well. And excited for kind of our talk today. But maybe give like a little just intro about yourself. You're a husband, you're a dad, I'm sure there are people who aren't sure who you are. So maybe just a little bit of an overview of who you are and yeah.
Yeah. So Daniel Huynh. I am a 39-year-old man that lives in Northern Virginia, but I am also a husband to my wife, Cecilia. We've been married for a little over 12 years now. I'm a father of four. I've got 4 young kids ranging from 12 to 4 years old, so always busy. I'm a youth football coach and flag football coach and basketball coach, just really leaning in and quite frankly, just learning leadership through mentoring children, right? And I think that has cascaded into a lot of success for me professionally and helping me develop, a deeper understanding of people. Because I think, children are reflective of who we grow up to be. But they're at the most primal level. So like when you can understand how to motivate and influence a child, and not to say that adults are different, but the motivations really kind of stay the same. So I've been able to take that experience and really thrive where I am today at Amazon Web Services. I operate as a AI sales specialist now, or sales strategist, or AI really, the name evolves based on who I speak with, but ultimately I am considered a thought leader when it comes to AI at AWS. One of my other responsibilities too is, the leading teams to develop basically the AI sales tools of the future for our global sales community. So really excited to kind of share some of the learnings with you and kind of what I see from the customers that I speak with. One caveat, I do want to throw this out there before we get too deep into the conversation, is everything I say today is of my own volition. This is my opinion and is not shared, or I hope, I don't want to assume that AWS is behind what I'm saying. So I want to be very, very clear. Like, this is my own opinion. And yeah.
Love and appreciate, hearing from the authentic you and not some regurgitated, what you've been kind of force fed or told to. And so, I think, especially in leadership, right? I mean, just being authentically yourself, that's one of the best things that we can ask for. And I'm excited to hear from you on some of these things. We haven't gone too deep into this topic, but man, AI is obviously here, and it is moving fast. I feel like I am seeing it, not just migrate into all of my platforms and everything, but it's in the headlines. It's a hot topic for sure, and especially when it comes, to leadership, and we'll talk more about that. But I feel like AI, it's one of the most talked about, but also maybe, I don't know, I feel like maybe it's one of the most misunderstood even things right now. Yeah. And so, if you had to explain AI, you're talking about leading children almost, I'm always like, if you had to explain AI to a leader in plain English, give it to me like I'm a child almost, how would you go about defining it?
It's a good question, Mike. Look, I think if I had to define it to a leader in plain English, it is an asset. It is a tool that allows us to maximize our human capacity. I think if I had to frame it up in my experience and how I've used AI to develop myself, but also really help develop others, it is the last mile. I think we all bring a ton of life experience into every situation that we're a part of. But when I think about AI, it is often misunderstood because, one, it started as a chatbot. And, it did all this magical stuff when we first got it. But, just like any new technology, understanding what it actually is almost the last thing to happen before, people start saying, hey, I've built all this crazy innovation. And what AI is to me, again, is the last mile for who we want to become, right? By filling in the gaps that we don't have. Me, I'll be super vulnerable. I'm, ADHD. I have a very sensitive, intuitive kind of nature where, I can understand and interpret people and the slight tics and movements in their body language. And, where AI fills in for me is sometimes with that intuitive nature, you make a lot of assumptions. And for me, it's almost like a thought partner. How do I synthesize an idea into something that is tangible? But for somebody else, it might be a teacher. For somebody else, it might be a design partner, right? So it is a evolving thing that I think changes based on the person wielding it. So I don't know if that was super clear or really plain English, but I think, it's philosophically speaking, I don't know that simplifying it does it justice, right? It is a tool that's been trained on almost all human knowledge to date that can predict and tie together different data points faster and more quickly than we ever could as human beings, right? So the person wielding it almost controls what it is for them.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And, one of the things that I hear the most, and even in conversations that I was having, like over the last week, I had a friend who, part of my role, I work in communications. He does marketing communications, and we're having this blunt conversation of, he was like, we're done for. Our, departments, everything is going to be obliterated. And so I guess, from where you sit, Like there are a lot of people who are worried, I guess, like in terms of, is AI coming for my job? Do you think people should be worried? Do you think people are like overreacting to some extent?
Yeah, yeah. So, look, I think if people saw where the technology actually is, the headlines would be less scary, right? And I say that in that, AI can do a lot of powerful things, but it still requires deep human input to make these things successful. You think about prompting it, in a chat, or, agents are a big topic of conversation nowadays, things that can autonomously act on your behalf. But who tells the agent what to do, right?
Yeah.
Who orchestrates a group of agents to make the right decisions? Like, those things are still uniquely human. So I would almost say the people that are most fearful of losing their jobs have the most to gain from AI. In that, by understanding what their job is, instead of it being the actual job that they do, learning to strategize and orchestrate a swarm of agents is the new role, right? And those that are resistant to change are the ones that probably serve the most to lose, right? I think it is something where, before we had touchscreen phones, there was a lot of things that we didn't think were possible. And now having all that information at the palm of your hand changes a lot of things. I mean, in good and bad ways. AI is almost the same thing, where it's like this new technology that we're still just scratching the surface of. But, instead of learning more about it, we sit here and fear what's coming. And like, to me, earlier I mentioned, it being the last mile, and, it maybe being a teacher for somebody. The best teacher of AI is the actual AI itself. So, as you sit there and think, AI is coming for my job, maybe ask AI the question, hey, this is my job role. How do I protect myself for future employment and ensure that, I have a place in 2029 or 2040? What skills can I learn today to make sure that, I'm employable for the long time, right? And because it's trained on all this news and all these forecasts and these expert predictions of what's happening, it will be able to reason and tell you exactly the path that you can take. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, if you ask the right questions, it will give you the right thing to do. For the most part, obviously still use your human judgment and your integrity and your spiritual beliefs as your guiding principles. But as you really think about, like, what's the next prompt I can put into my AI, think more about, what are some of the questions that I am concerned about and I fear. And then how do I solve them even in this age? And it can give you a pretty good framework of a plan and a course of action that you can take.
Yeah. Man. What are the, like, I don't know, from your vantage point, from where you sit, as you see companies beginning to, like, adopt AI in these early stages, like, are there clear mistakes that you feel like they're making in adopting it and taking it on?
Yeah, no, I think it's that human element, right? I think, companies, especially larger enterprises, are under an immense amount of pressure because their boards are consuming these same headlines that you and I are. AI is the future. It can do X, Y, and Z faster. So what they mandate is, like, you need to use the tools or you don't really have a place.
Yeah.
Without really providing that level of understanding and security that AI can bring, right? They are under this pressure where, again, if the metric is usage and you don't know how to use it, is that a metric that is attainable for a lot of folks, right? And quite frankly, there's very varying to like there's levels to AI usage, right?
Yeah.
And I say that in that, if I gave my mother, who's over 70, ChatGPT, and I gave a 15-year-old kid the same tools, what they would ultimately come out with is very, very different, in that, what they can ask it or what they know to ask it changes. So I would implore everybody to really think about, the change management aspect of AI, right? And not so in that, hey, we are going to change your job or you must use these tools or you're at risk. It's more of a, how do I design experiences for my employees where the friction comes to close to zero? How do I engineer outcomes, not outputs, because outputs to me are the responses you get from ChatGPT. In the enterprise or business setting, you want to engineer outcomes. So you kind of hold the keys to your team's success in that, like, if you give them a blank canvas and say, make me art, that's a very difficult thing. But if you give them a finished masterpiece and say, I just need you to sign your name at the bottom or add a couple more brushstrokes for taste, that's when you start to see the needle move for what people perceive AI to be in their role, in the context that they live in. And that's where you actually start to gain real adoption and start to lead into actual innovation. Because now they understand the concepts. You've shown them. Instead of told them this is how you use it, you've shown them what it's supposed to look like. And the funny thing about the human brain is it will figure out the gaps and really help connect the dots organically. And those people that are actually using it are going to be the ones that understand it the most, right? Like if I think about my own journey, when it first came out, I talked a lot about the concepts around AI, and trying to sell it. But when I started building myself, that's when the needle moved to like just a deeper understanding. But if I was gated by the need to understand how to write in fluent prompting languages and exactly how to structure and organize my prompts, that becomes a very difficult hill to climb. So, you start usage by making it easy, and then that usage dictates more usage and leads to actual understanding. And that's when you get people that love it, use it. And if you get people to love it and use it, you as a business owner, you as a leader, only see the benefits of that, right? But if it is mandated and there's a natural inclination to resist because you feel like you need to protect your job because you aren't secure in your position, because you're afraid of the headlines, you don't see any of the benefits of AI. And now you've lost an employee that is truly aligned to the mission that you might have, but just can't get over this fear of loss of security.
Ooh, that's good. It kind of segues a little bit. I have been reading a bit, just even in preparing for this, and I have an article that I was reading from Harvard Business Review, and talking about, of course, AI in the workplace, and it was saying how research is suggesting that AI, that it doesn't necessarily reduce work, but it's actually intensifying it. So it says how AI makes it easier to do more in less time. So obviously accelerating productivity, but it can also lead to what researchers are calling brain fry. As employees juggle multiple tools and outputs, their attention becomes overloaded and people are finding themselves burning out faster than before. And I feel like, to an extent, I feel like I've almost even felt that myself at times, being so overwhelmed, trying to process all of this. And so, I'm trying to think through, how how can leaders continue to maximize AI? And of course, like this is a new tool on the scene and we all want to enhance productivity, but at the same time, we don't want to overwhelm or overload our people and our teams with it, right? And so you talk about, make that access point easy for them, and maybe even like some hand-holding guidance at the beginning. I get what is that, what do you think that, like, what does that look like, I guess? Or is that what kind of the way with this you think to go?
Yeah, so like what I mean by hand-holding is, look, I think access to LLMs, and there's a lot of them out there. An LLM, I mean by large language model, for those that don't know, this is basically the technology that is behind ChatGPT, Claude Anthropic, or Anthropic Claude, the Google Geminis of the world. When you, again, put it behind a chatbot, you leave the cognitive load on the user in how do I architect the right prompt to get the right outcomes that I'm looking for. And when you give somebody a tool with all of human knowledge in it, the question I have for most people is where do you start, right? Like, where do you start, And I think when you think about that, and you think about this natural inclination to resist this change that feels like impending doom, that where do you start becomes almost crippling. So when I say remove the friction to access, it is providing an engineered experience. So let's say, for instance, an agent has a number of different instructions that it's supposed to carry out for you. It can access all these different tools. And by tools, I mean, like, let's say you have a CRM, or let's say you have a ticketing system for your customer support. It's able to access those tools and write to them or pull data back from them as necessary. Something like that, where maybe the input isn't, how do I prompt this? It's, let me put in my customer name, and here is the expected outcome that we're looking for here. That is what I mean by really driving adoption up by lowering the friction, is remove the need to prompt, remove the need to truly engage with the platform, and really just require some inputs that then will turn around and give you really rich and deep kind of insight, research, outcomes, whatever they might be. And then as people start to see what it's producing and how it's producing it, there's this organic and passive kind of knowledge transfer in, oh, okay, so these are some of the outer limits of like some of the questions I can ask. If I know that I can get here, then what questions do I ask to get to this particular outcome? And like that curiosity starts to pervade like their understanding of the actual tools. So again, it isn't, here's a tool, good luck. It's, here's what the technology does and what it can do. And as you continue to use it, you will start to understand how.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's helpful. Rather than just, like you said, here's kind of just dumping it on people and just trying to hope that they figure it out for themselves, especially when, we were talked about, people are so fearful of like, well, if I can't keep up or if I don't know what to do with this, my job is in jeopardy. Have you ever seen the movie Jurassic Park?
Of course.
Okay. So
which one
in the
is
movie?
The question? There's like 12 of them.
Like the original. Like right?
Okay.
That's true.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, what version of it? There's a new one that just came out, right?
Yeah. Mutant dinosaurs. Wild.
Right. But in the original, right? Jeff Goldblum, like his character, he has this like awesome line, which I feel like I love his delivery every time with whatever he says. But he has this line where he basically says how like your scientists, like in terms of developing dinosaurs in this park and everything, he's like, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they like even could do this, they never stopped to think like should we do this? They never stop to think like, that if we should. And so I guess like, of course throughout history there have been like massive, leaps in technology, right? Like we had the Industrial Revolution, and obviously like the internet came on the scene, and like social media, of course, like the day and age. And it's like looking historically at these like massive thrusts of technology forward, innovation, how we become more innovative and are able to accomplish more, and it brings more opportunity. But as with the opportunity also comes a lot of like disruption. Just consequences of that. Like I feel like AI is moving so fast.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we're moving like faster than our ability to like handle or foresee the consequences that might come from this?
That's a great question. And I love the tie into that Jeff Goldblum line, because as you said it, I was like, wow, that's deep, right? And, I think we should, right? Because this is still a product of humanity, right? Like AI, be it computers, there was a human that gave this idea up and started building this idea. And I think the fruits of it, we really aren't seeing in full force just yet. I think what we are seeing is, again, just scratching the surface of what's possible. But I ask you, like, if, let's say the paralegal profession is the first to get hit because AI just has a deeper understanding of text and everything that might be applicable to law. Let's say that profession goes away, but in return, we finally find the cure for cancer because it's now able to connect all these disparate data points that we don't know exist between these connections. Like it might find that like a flower actually has the right kind of characteristics to help reduce like, and again, these are, I'm just making this up, but I think to myself, like, there are so many benefits that we have yet to be seen that will solve human conditions that have ailed us for millennia. That would not be possible if we didn't have it. Now, in return, there might be some disruption, but I think anybody that's experienced a loved one that has either survived cancer or has lost a loved one to cancer, that is easily a worthwhile kind of, I would trade my job today to do that. Right. And I think that's what people are missing, right? They in general, they can see the 5 feet in front of them because they understand it. They control it. They know it. But, when you see a technology that's so new and so early in its understanding of like what is next, then you start to think, I don't know if that's even a realistic possibility. And to me, when I work with healthcare companies, like these are things that they are trying to solve for actively using AI.
Yeah, I think, I think just in general, of course, I think there's always a tension we have to hold with these things. And, again, like there's no stopping this, like it's here, and we want to be able to, like you said, it's a tool, it's an asset, and we want to be able to maximize these things. At the same time, like AI will never have a soul. There is something about life form, right, that separates us from this. And so how do we continue? I think it's that tension of like, hey, keeping your humanness intact.
Humanity. Yeah.
as much as possible. And even referencing back to like, talking at the beginning about, you kind of building leadership principles off of just coaching kids. And I think back often to that, being kind of always trying to get back to like that child like experience, when, man, imagination ran wild, and you just, kind of a freedom that came with that, but as life progresses, you you go through challenges, you get hurt, you get wounds, you close off, like things happen, and it can be so easy to lose that aspect of ourselves. And so I think just in general, there's this important tension to continue to manage and to hold. And so I think that's an important piece. I guess what would you say maybe to like just the leader who's like just overwhelmed right now with all of this, or maybe is like, I feel so far behind, like I don't even know, like over the next 30, 60, 90 days, like what would be step one, for just a leader who's like, okay, I know I need to dip my toe in. I know I need to do, start getting acclimated somehow to this. But I don't even know where to begin. What would you say to like a leader who's maybe wrestling with that of like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to get left behind, like if I don't start doing something.
Start doing something, right? I think, if you allow the fear to cripple you from making that first step, is it your decision at that point? Yeah, it absolutely is if you're going to get left behind. And the fear of like, if I don't do something, I will be left behind. That analysis paralysis is something that I think cripples a lot of folks, right?
Yeah.
Just in their general lives, outside of leadership, outside of the corporate environment, not starting is the biggest source of regret for so many. So what I would recommend is like, for a leader that is apprehensive or scared that they're going to start being left behind, there's two things that I would start, suggesting. One, build something, right? There's so many different tools out there that can take an idea to a prototype, that in just natural language, start building something. And then in that same vein, this is what I'd recommend. And I think this is a tip that gets lost on a lot of folks because the first thing that we were introduced to was a chat interface, is use natural voice. Right? If there's a voice input that you can take, use it, right? And then really just dump as much as you can about your ideas, the concepts that you're thinking about, and then watch what happens, right? And through that, you get this understanding of what it can do and what it can't do, but it's deeply personal. And when something is like personal, it's, let's say, a software app that you've built to ail what's been bothering you for a decade, this small thing, kind of like a scratch on your car, you walk past it every day and it bothers you, but you just don't have time to get to fixing it. But it weighs on you all the time. This would be one of those things where it's like, what are those things that you have always wanted to solve for? And then see if the AI can get you there. And then once you see that happen the first time, it is something where it's like, I understand it now. I get what I'm supposed to do with this.
Yeah.
Secondarily, look, I think a lot of people get caught up in learning about the technology. I think that's less important than understanding how others or how it might be useful to you, right? Like, stop worrying about like, what are agents? What is Claude Code? What is OpenClaw? What are all these big buzzy things that I keep reading about in the news? And it be more, okay, so I see that's how you build an app. I see a really smart person that leads an AI company on YouTube, happily like sharing this knowledge. Let me consume some of those things. Watch other people and how they're doing it. And there's this kind of unique perspective that comes from that, right? In that maybe it's not so hard, right? And I think really that's what it comes down to. It is not that difficult to use. The technology behind it might be complicated, but the way that these companies have built kind of platforms around the AI experience has lowered the friction to a degree where anybody can pick it up and start finding usage and start finding value in it. I don't think it's a surprise. And, if you do some, there's a lot of AI native companies that are starting up from 17, 18, 19-year-olds that, quite frankly, they didn't know that what they were doing was wrong. They said, I've got an idea, and I'm going to use AI to help me get there, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have those years of trauma that have been built up saying, no, you can't do that, or no, that's wrong, or no, whatever it might be that holds you back from moving forward. They just said, I'm going to go get it, right? And I think if everybody was able to adopt that mentality, especially in leadership, as you lead companies, your ability to influence people to use it increases when you actually understand the technology itself. And you as a founder, as a business leader, as anything, if you can demonstrate effectiveness with these tools, then your ability to actually show passion and not just manage based on metrics. Like, did this person use it? Did Susie, use enough tokens today? Or, did anybody log into this particular tool that I paid for other people to use? No. Yeah. But when you could start leaning over their shoulder and saying, have you thought about doing it this way? And it work? That's when people are like, yeah, no, if he's using it, if she's using it, I can too.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I love the, like coming back to the humanity portion and side of it, right? Like using it as an asset, as a tool to, yes, there are outputs that it can create, but using it as a tool to create that bond and build that bridge, within your team, keeping that relational aspect, I guess, with your teammates, and not just, again, leadership of just like, hey, I'm going to dump this on you and you figure it out, but making it personal to them, I think is where it would become really powerful.
Yeah.
So, as you look to the future, from where you sit right now, I guess, what are you most optimistic about? And then maybe like what worries you a little bit?
I think what I'm most optimistic about is what it can do for the historically underrepresented, the historically, folks that live in these rural areas that are just now starting to see internet access, the people that have difficult circumstances that they've lived through, and unique perspectives that they have, and getting these tools to them and seeing what can come of it, right? From our vantage point, it's difficult to empathize with somebody that lives in a rural town with 100 people. But the problems that they experience are more common to an entire population than, where you and I sit with a mortgage that's paid for, a couple car notes, some kids. We don't understand the struggle of what it looks like from meal to meal, or, the hustle that it takes to make sure that dinner's served. I feel like when we get tools in front of those folks and really broad access, we're going to start to see an emergence of like just overwhelming value to humanity. Because again, these problems are real world problems: poverty, lack of access to water, these kind of like things where, like, while it might seem like a money-making venture to somebody that's well off, that owns a business that deals with this, for somebody else it's survival. And when you have that kind of perspective, the level of depth and the passion that you put behind creating a solution to those problems is exponentially higher than somebody that's just in it for profit.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I think that segues into what I'm most fearful of, right? And again, I want to be super clear. These are my opinions and not the opinions of my employer, Amazon Web Services. I think this need for profit outweighs the amount of good that this can do for humanity. I think we are racing towards an inevitable future of, what they say is AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is defined as a AI that is capable of exceeding human intelligence and capability. This rush to that means that, or the reason that they're rushing to that is really the first person that has it is, they say that that company is going to have the power of the future. Mm-hmm. So it really just kind of brings me back to, everybody was so busy doing it. They never stopped to think, should we? Right. Yeah. And that is what scares me, in that, we're racing towards this future to get this thing, but this thing might be more powerful than we can ever imagine. And, once you open Pandora's box, it's really hard to put the thing back in there.
Right. Right.
So it's that, and is it for the right reasons? Is it for intellectual satisfaction? Is it for, the good of humanity? Or is it for the quest to world domination through revenue and profit? Right. And if it's for the wrong reasons, just like anything in anybody's life, right, your intention behind why you're doing something deeply impacts every single step of doing it. Right. If I'm only building for the good of humanity, then I'm very intentional about where I put guardrails in, where I put safeguards in, how I'm designing this thing so that people can use it easier. If I'm only in it for profit, I am chasing this big shiny object. I am trying to buy up as much power capacity and real estate as I can to create just more and more and more. And that abundance can also be that thing that takes us closer to this bleak future that so many people have forecasted, massive job loss and all these things, because they aren't thinking about the person that it's supposed to be serving. If we are serving computers, chase AGI. But we know for a fact that that's not who's going to be using this tool. It's humans. And I think that's, to sum it up, I'm fearful that there are the wrong intentions behind all this innovation and all this evolution. You mentioned earlier how quickly it's coming. Me being at the forefront of it, my head spins on a week-to-week basis about just the massive leaps and capabilities that these labs are rolling out week to week, just to chase each other down. Right? There's no mistake to me where, if Anthropic releases their newest model, the ChatGPT's right behind it, and then Gemini's right behind it. But are they rushing for the quality of the product and the quality of how people are engaging with it, or are they rushing to keep up with the Joneses? And when you start to have that chase where, everybody's leapfrogging one another, it ruins to me, it is innovation, but it ruins the purpose of it. Right.
Right. Yeah. And that's a great reminder to, any leader that might be listening, I guess, obviously, unfortunately, right, there's always going to be people with wrong intentions in the world. But man, self-leadership and what is in your hands, what's in your control, and how are you able to incorporate this and use this to not just produce a profit, but to better humanity, right? And to better our teams and to better our people. And I think that's really important. And we've said this word intention a couple of times now, and just wanted to transition as we're kind of wrapping up today. You have shared with me a little side project that you've been working on, an application called Intention, and I've had the benefit of getting to play with it a little bit, and it's been incredible, and it's super powerful, and I think it's going to be so helpful for people when this thing is available. But I'd love for you to just share a little bit about like what it is, and maybe why the genesis of it, why you built it.
Yeah. Intention is going to be an app that is a communication coach that allows you to empathize with these loved ones or these significant others or just other people in your life, whether they be coworkers, parents, whatever have you. And when I say empathize with them, I think that word is very strong, but it can also be very difficult to use effectively. Because we are, as humans, and this is no fault of our own, just selfish creatures, right? We see our viewpoint. We imagine that the world revolves around us and that we are the hero in every story or the villain in every story. But in relationships, there's not one person that is greater than the other. If it's a true relationship, you both have lived your own unique experiences and have, unfortunately, your own unique traumas that dictate how you view life and how you view a certain situation. So what my app does is it allows you to understand the perspective of another and frame your message so that your intention shines through what you're saying. I think there's a lot of times where, we probably think about somebody that we have a relationship with, either romantically or just as a friend. Why don't they listen? Why can't they understand me? I keep telling them and they just don't listen. Maybe it's not them. Maybe it's the way that you're delivering the message, in that, if this person is, and one of the definitions is a supportive connector who indexes very highly towards, nurturing relationships and, caring for others and, think about a motherly persona or a fatherly persona in a professional environment, that manager that you can always go to for advice. And you might be a tactical leader who we've defined as, somebody that is very organizationally oriented, somebody that almost has a very type A personality, that has a certain rigor and demand for how they like their process to be. Just as I've described those two archetypes, you can understand how a message between those two gets lost in translation, right?
Yeah.
How do I reframe my message that still feels natural to me, but is much more impactful to them, so that whatever I'm trying to communicate lands with this person that I do care about, right?
Yeah.
And why I built it, is I am a different kind of thinker. I am very outspoken, professionally. I am, a leader, but I also don't like to be led. So that makes me a very difficult person to manage. What was never in question was my ability to deliver results. But what was in question was my behavior and the way that I engage with my managers if I didn't agree with something that they dictated, or that they said this was the way it was going to be. And I started to extrapolate that experience of how many people are there like me in the professional setting, especially at a high performance place like AWS, where that little bit of friction could really change the trajectory of your career. how do we level it so that way, from a culture perspective, everybody has harmonious relationships. There is no more like, I can't stand my boss, or, this person never does what I tell them to do. And when you start to apply that message to something that resonates deeply with them, that reframes what the motivation is because it is rooted in how that person is wired, the results that you get back from that have an exponential impact to what you put in, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost empathy as a service where, if you can't quite understand why or how that person is thinking or how they're responding to your message, how do we reframe it to abstract away all the emotion and all the trauma, and really distill it down to like, who are they and why or how do they like to receive this information, or how do I, in a marriage, how do I communicate to my husband or my wife that, they are not present when they are at home. They're constantly on their phone. They're looking up Instagram or they're playing games, without triggering them and creating a flywheel effect of defensiveness and then trauma and then yelling and then defensiveness and then accusations.
Yeah.
How do I communicate that to them more effectively? And that's what the app is for. You can communicate by talking into it and saying, this is what I'm doing, or this is the problem that I'm having, and this is how I would like to solve it. And it interpret, understand, and give you an action plan that you can execute that is easily integrated with your calendar. So as you think, like, if I needed to put a block of time to sit down and connect with my wife for 20 minutes, this is the block that I'm going to use. And then as that block comes up, the app will coach you and say, hey, I know that you have this coming up. Here are some good talking points based on the information that we had. So that way you can start the conversation more effectively, right? So you can approach this with the right intention.
It's great, man. And I think it's a beautiful example of just what we've been talking about, right? Like today with maximizing the AI technology in order to better, right, humanity, in order to better our relationships. And I think it's going to be so helpful for people because I agree, obviously everyone's unique, everyone's different, everyone's wired different, everyone's got different experiences. And I think everyone's got kind of a different, communication frequency, different way of expressing themselves, and a different way of receiving that, so often, you have people who it's like, I know you said this, but I heard that. And this kind of really helps break down those barriers for, like you said, whether it be a romantic relationship with your spouse, whether it just be a friendship, whether it be a coworker, whether it be your boss. I know in the short time that I was able to play with it a little bit, like the ease of using the app and the practicality of like the tangible steps that it gave. Yep. I think AI is, it's moving very fast, but there are parts of it sometimes that are still clunky. And sometimes they'll put something out and I'm like, really? What?
Yeah.
That?
Yeah.
But this has been so clear, and like, I don't know, clear direction of like, oh man, I can do that, and that's so easy, and it just clicks, kind of makes sense, and so I'm super excited for this thing to release, because I think it's going to be super helpful once it is. But Daniel, man, thank you so much for being here today, for this conversation, for sharing with us. So grateful for you, and I honestly have you to thank. Daniel is really one of the main reasons why I even started this whole podcast thing to begin with. He is a huge encouragement to me and a push for me to get this thing launched. And so just thank you, man. Truly, for doing that. So grateful for you. Love Cece, love your family. And it's just been a joy getting to know you more and more over these last few years. And man, excited to see what the future holds for you, for your role, and for intention as well. But thanks for pressing in with us today. And super grateful for you.
Likewise, Mike. I know you mentioned I was a source of your encouragement, and you've been a source of a lot for me. You've been the core and the center of my journey to faith, and ultimately what has allowed me to really explore my own humanity. And I think through that influence has shaped the way that I work with folks, the way that I think about AI, and I'm grateful for that. So, it's truly a two-way relationship. And I'm grateful. I'm privileged to have been on the podcast, and very excited to see what comes for you, man. Again, I've always shared with you, your message is important, and the way that you deliver it and how you deliver it is special. And man, I know success is right around the corner, and I'm so excited for you as well, man. So let's continue this mutually beneficial relationship, and see where it goes, man.
Yeah, looking forward. I appreciate that, man. So, well, thanks so much for joining us today on the Leadership Press podcast. Continue to press in. It's in the pressing that purpose is revealed, that the oil is produced. So like, comment, subscribe, share this with a leader that you know, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Leadership Press. Take care.